Hello, and welcome to Backcountry Wood Products. Join us for our series on the assembly of the EcoPro 300 Firewood processor. So, before we get started assembling, we need to take off the output conveyor box and set it on the floor. Next, we need to take off the frame. In order to do this, we need to take off the two bolts that are on each corner to remove the framework. Now that you have the rack off, now we can take the shrink wrap off, take all your parts out, put them off to the side, and get down to the base unit so we can begin assembly. Before we go any further, I want to point out a few things as you're unpackaging. Be very, very careful as your toolbox is loose and your wire for your hour meter and your kill switch can be easily torn off while you're unpackaging the engine. Before we put the axle on, I suggest just slipping it down into this area back in here while we lift it up to put the axle on. I also want to point out over here on the hoses we have little paper letters. Do not take these off. We will refer back to these later while we're putting on the hydraulics. Now we're ready to take the base unit and lift it up to put the axle on. There's several different ways we can do this. You can use jacks and block it up. The preferred method is to lift it up using a tractor, forks off of a skid steer, or a forklift. What I do is use straps and pick it up and put across the forks. That's what works for me, might not work for you, you'll have to figure it out. But while you're doing it, be very, very careful not to pinch off any hoses or have the straps putting weight on the engine or any component that might be damaged. Now that we have it lifted up, we can put the axle in. But before you put it in, remember to put the holes, these are the holes for your fender bolts, put them up when you slide it into your axle spot. Now that you have your axle in with equal amounts from this point here to here on either side, you can tighten up your bolts back here and then tighten up the nuts for a lock on it. Now we're ready to put the wheel on, but before we can put it on the spindle, we need to pack our bearings with grease. Alright, now we're ready to put the wheel on. Simply take the nut off, slide your wheel on, put your bearing that you have freshly greased onto the spindle, put your castle nut back on, and tighten this up until very tight, and then back off until the wheel moves freely. After you do that, you can take your cotter key or pin and slip it down through the hole and bend the two tabs over. So, now that you're done with that, we can put the cap on with the rubber mallet and then repeat on the other side, and we're ready to go with the wheels. Alright, we got the wheels on. Now before we can set it down, all we got to do is put the stand in front. Simply take the cotter key and pin out, slip into place, put it on a setting, put your cotter key back in, and now we can safely put down the processor back on the ground. So, now that we have the unit back on the ground, we can put the fenders on. The fenders have two holes. Those go to the rear of the machine. And we simply just put two bolts in through the axle to bolt them on. On the left side of the machine, we're going to have to reroute a hydraulic line through this hole here and reconnect. On the other side of the machine, just simply put the 2 bolts down through the axle. Alright, now that you have the fenders on, torque the lug nuts to 75 foot-pounds. So thank you for watching part 1 of our assembly of the EcoPro 300. Join us in our next video as we continue our journey of the assembly of the EcoPro 300 firewood processor.